You're listening to Articulate with your hosts, Kevin Kramer and Sean Gillespie, your go-to guys for art tips, techniques, and general artist ramblings. Presented by drawingandcoloring.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Articulate. This is episode 3 of the podcast.
Yes,
going right along here.
Moving it.
And today's subject is, what is today's subject?
Today's subject is choosing your subject. So it's
pretty
subject about a subject.
How good.
Right.
All right.
So a lot of things to go over here, a lot of ins and outs, and a lot of what have yous.
Yeah.
But we're going to start it off with, how do you choose your subject? Now, you can draw anything. And if you draw it well and paint it well, it'll be interesting. Yeah. So, as we go through this, we're not really going to focus on how to paint and draw a particular subject well in this particular podcast. We're just going to talk about more
it's about be a little more conceptual.
Yeah, your inspiration for the subject. How if you've got writer's block, you don't even know what to paint. Painter's block. Then how to choose a subject. So it's choosing subject.
Yeah. So I guess what are some of the things? What for someone trying to figure out what? If they're not just completely automatically drawn to something, then how does someone go about finding their subject?
Well, maybe we should start off with how people used to think, or where people used to think their ideas came from.
Okay.
So
that sounds like a good idea.
Back in the day, in Greece, they thought that their ideas came from muses.
A muse.
Now, Kevin has a pretty good definition for us on that.
I do have a definition, and here it says a muse was a goddess of the inspiration of literature, science, and the arts, considered the source of knowledge related orally for centuries in the ancient culture that was contained in poetic lyrics and myths.
All right, so it looks like you and I used the same source.
Yeah,
Is that pretty much.
I think that was Wikipedia.
But what I was surprised to find, which I didn't know this, is that there were supposedly 9 muses, some say 3. There's a little bit of argument on that on the internet. But even when you had 9 muses instead of 3, none of them were artists or painters.
Well, that's not good.
Kevin, there was an artist for epic poetry.
Okay.
A muse for, or said an artist for, I meant muse for epic poetry, a muse for history, a muse for love poetry, a muse for song poetry, a muse
a lot of poetry in here.
3 muses for poetry alone.
They're kind of hogging the
3
board
for
on
poetry,
that one.
and yet painting doesn't get one. That I feel like got a little slighted here.
Yeah.
There's one for tragedy, hymns, dance, comedy, and astronomy. Now, I did a little research into this because I wanted to know why there wasn't one for the visual arts, and it turns out that in ancient Greece, sculptors and painters were held in low regard. They were basically considered just above a slave, but less than a free man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were
That's
considered
awesome.
manual laborers, and they were not respected at all in those times, and so they didn't get a muse.
Is that where the starving artist comes from?
I guess so.
Wow.
One thing that I found interesting in that regard is that in the word art actually derives from the Latin word ars, A-R-S, which maybe I'm mispronouncing it. So
hopefully.
So I was like, arse? I'm going to need to research this a little more.
Yeah.
It turns out that actually means skill or method or technique. So I was glad to see that.
That's a little better.
Yeah, it actually holds a connotation of beauty and it has no relevance to the arse. So,
what an arse.
What an arse. So let's talk about, we can't really rely on muses these days, can we, Kevin?
No, I can't. I can't say that would be a practical way to go about. Although those topics specifically that were mentioned, I think would be muses in themselves.
Okay.
If not, if that's not what that's replying or kind of referring to, as the poetry is the muse.
Oh, I see. That could be a muse for other work.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, well, that definitely could be.
I think that in that way it would be good way of using that. Because is this referring to?
Well, these are the muses give the muse will give you ideas for these. Right.
Interesting.
That's how it's. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
That would be it. If it worked the other way, you could use these
In a more practical society.
Yeah, in a more practical. Yeah.
We could go with that
Right.
as the topics or possible muses.
Right, but overall, you don't want to sit and wait around for the divine inspiration.
No,
there are a few
absolutely
things
not.
you can do. You know, I go for walks a lot of times to get ideas.
Yeah, just
and
getting
things
around,
like that.
moving. Those
But
are definitely good ways.
on the internet, I was reading some web pages, and they were talking about art as a business. And one of their ideas was to look up what is selling really well and paint that. Now, how do you feel about that, Kevin?
Well, that as far as selling or creating stuff specifically to be sold,
Right, choosing a subject based on what is popular and what is selling well right now. How do you feel about that?
that actually makes me cringe.
Makes you cringe a little
don't
bit?
really
Just
like-
instinctively you're cringing at that?
I don't like that. I don't like that whole concept of, because it brings you into that genre of, I don't even really like this, but I'm creating it so I can make it for a sale.
All right. Now,
And that's just, to me, that's uninspired work.
okay.
And I can't put all that I want into that. So
I gotcha.
it's no good for me.
I feel like maybe there's a medium here because I know
Yeah?
when I was in college, they're like, write for your audience, and I wrote a paper arguing what you're saying that,
Right.
well, you know, anything you write or anything you create, if it's of interest to you,
Yeah.
there's so many people in the world that somebody else is going to be interested in that.
To a
But
degree.
then finding that audience and, but in my mind, it was a matter of writing or painting or making your art. And then once it's made, trying to find the audience and market it toward rather than creating manufactured work for a particular audience, which is...
That kind of gets a throwback to our first podcast on creating that aura and all of that other stuff around it.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother podcast, obviously, but
Well, a little food for thought. According to Art Business Today, in a survey they did, which is a little outdated, it was a 2003 survey, and I could only find it for the UK.
nice.
So it's probably a little different in the US, but they had the top 10 best-selling subjects for painting.
For actual paintings.
Yeah,
okay.
for paintings. These are for paintings particularly, but I'm sure they would be applicable to drawing and things too. But anyway, the first number one bestseller is traditional landscapes. After that was number two is local views. So,
Politics?
No, I think it means like local images and local. Like so if you're if you live in Austin or you live in
Right.
wherever you live, then just images from there. Next was modern or semi-abstract landscapes.
Interesting.
And then number 4 was just abstracts in general. Number 5 was dogs.
Dogs.
People love dogs.
People do love. This is a dog city.
Right, it's a dog city, man. And I've actually had some requests for dog paintings, which we'll go into later.
Can't say that.
Yeah. Number 6, figure studies, excluding nudes.
Excluding nudes.
Excluding nudes.
Wow.
Yeah, for number 6. Number 7 was seascapes. Which I think that's probably more of a UK thing.
Yeah.
I don't think seascapes would, maybe this is just me being in middle of Texas as opposed to on the coast.
In the desert
Right.
of Texas.
But yeah, I mean, seascapes are not super popular around here.
Right.
And then the next one was wildlife at number 8. 9 was impressionistic landscapes, which...
All landscapes.
Yeah, landscapes, very popular.
No one likes to draw people.
Right. Well, number 10, you'll be happy to see.
All the way at the bottom.
All the way at the bottom, number 10,
Nude.
which, is nudes. Yeah.
Nudes at the bottom.
Nudes at the bottom, which I would think
No
those
portraits, though.
should be number 1. Well, they have figure studies, I think, covers portraits for at number 6, excluding nudes.
Okay.
So,
but even still, 6, I would think it would be
Yeah.
higher than that.
so if you were to follow what they're recommending on some of the certain sites on the internet and
What people are looking for.
right, looking for, then obviously you would be painting a lot of traditional landscapes.
Yeah.
That would be your
Which I can't
area.
really get down with.
Well, I think that sometimes I want to paint a landscape and sometimes I want to paint some nudes. So I
I
say
don't think anyone's going to debate that.
paint whatever you want, keep it diverse, and then try to find your audience.
Yeah.
But they did have some other good recommendations. And one of the things I think it's important to remember is you need to decide really for yourself whether you're trying to make a living as an artist or whether you're doing it for fun and or both. You know, and you can do it both.
And you know, there's always those little niches in
Right.
any community. Like if I go up into northeast of the U.S., they're gonna have a more specific type of image that they
Right.
kind of pander to,
Oh, absolutely.
like the seascapes.
Yeah, like seascapes may definitely be more popular in the Cape Cod area.
Right, and then in the
So,
west they
yeah.
have more mountains and things
Right.
like that. But that's going to be more landscapes
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to.
Depends on where you are. You got to know your audience,
Yeah,
know your demographic.
exactly.
Yeah.
It kind of goes
And-
with just building up your own persona and what you can do.
Right. And I would venture to say, though, that you don't necessarily have to paint for that audience in your area, but understand that if you don't, then you may have to sell your work
Outside,
elsewhere.
yeah, exactly.
So you may have
Definitely.
to travel. It may be more difficult to sell your work, and you may have to travel farther to sell your work
Exactly.
if you're not painting.
A really good example is Norman Rockwell's work.
Mm-hmm.
He lived up in the Northeast
right.
in a specific small little town where he only painted those specific people.
Right.
Because they gave him the exact aesthetic for all of his work.
Right.
So
Yeah.
everybody, he go travel the country and everything else, and he settled in that one town because it had all of the people.
Yeah.
So
Everything.
they were all of his subjects for his images.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
So it's,
So
you know,
that-
it's kind of,
Yeah.
that was a cool little fact. But
Right, that
it's
is
just,
a cool little factoid. I didn't know that. Actually, I mean, I knew that he used a lot of the same people, but I didn't know they were all his neighbors and
Yeah,
things like
it's
that.
crazy.
So that's interesting.
It's really interesting because
Um,
it's basically their if they were on the Times
Right.
magazine or the Post,
Right, the post.
so they could get a sitting and then they'd go see themselves on the Post,
Right,
in a
yeah.
major
That would be cool.
publication. That was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
That's kind of a rare deal, though. Although,
Yeah, nowadays, I don't
Dr.
know.
Seuss too. You know, the
Yeah.
Who's were the people in his town. too.
Exactly. So yeah,
So yeah, so that's interesting. So
you can find your muses anywhere.
right, muses can be anywhere, and then they could be your neighbors. They could
Exactly.
be anything. Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. So another thing that they were talking about is, which I found interesting and had not occurred to me in the past, is if you are trying to stay current and you want your work to stay, popular and to keep up with the trends, they recommended going to trade shows and see what is selling. Also recommended
Being in it.
right, yeah, and also recommended reviewing consumer catalogs that are devoted to home furnishing. Which I'd never thought of doing that, but
Interesting.
that makes sense because
Yeah.
Those
What are people populating their rooms with?
right, exactly, and people are buying. Well, mahogany furniture is very popular this year.
Right.
Then if you complement those colors with yours, then I'm not saying that this is an idea that you should do.
Again, see that,
but I'm
that kind
saying-
of goes with the.
Yeah.
I tend to find myself leaning towards things that are a little more, I guess you could say, timeless. Mm-hmm. A little more.
I agree.
They go from
Yeah,
one era to another, and then it just kind of has a resurgence.
Right.
And then that's what I like.
Oh, I absolutely agree
it's a
with you.
steady line. It's
Yeah.
not a
Oh,
little
yeah.
fling, a flash
Yeah.
in the pan type of deal.
I absolutely agree with you.
Because you kind of if you're flip flop like that,
Right.
you get into that area of selling out.
Are you? Yeah, that's what I was about to say next.
and
Is you got a
that's-
question because every artist, if you're working professionally as an artist,
Definitely.
you're gonna find yourself being offered to paint something that you really don't want to paint. And you don't feel like comfortable painting,
Exactly.
but you really need the money. And where is that line? What is that line on selling out? Because you have to. I mean, as an artist, you have to paint for money, but people who are buying
Right.
it
You have
might
to-
have different tastes.
Exactly. You have to paint for your audience or
Right.
draw for your audience.
Yeah.
And it is a fine line of where is that I need to survive versus
Right. I need food. I need to eat.
I need to do work that's inspired.
But I must maintain my artistic integrity.
Right.
Where's that line? I know as a muralist, I often have to paint logos, and I do not like
Right.
painting logos.
Yeah.
But I try to make it my own by painting things around the logos
Exactly.
that are
Kinda incorporating your
interesting.
own little bit of style in there.
And I feel like you have to do that just to keep your sanity. And I feel like that's what Michelangelo did. Now, one source I read considers Michelangelo the biggest sellout in history.
Oh, really?
Which I
Nice.
don't agree with.
That's up to debate, I would say.
Well, he was a sculptor. He wasn't a painter.
Right.
He hated painting, and if he considered painting a lower art form. So,
Wow.
a lot of my resources today really knocking on the painters, which
Yeah.
really bothered me. I gotta say,
I see
reading
that.
it. But he wanted to sculpt, and fact, he wanted to sculpt men. You know, that was what he's into.
Hey,
and that's cool.
to each
That's
his
cool.
own. To each his own.
I'm not judging here, but that's his thing. He
Yeah.
wanted to sculpt men. And so Pope Julius II was like, hey, dude. This is how he talked. He actually said, dude.
He's very
like,
precise.
Dude, really need some paint splashed on this here ceiling in the old Sistine Chapel.
Right
It's
up
looking sparse.
Yeah.
And Michelangelo's like, dude. I don't know.
Just a bunch of dude, bro.
Yeah, a lot of dude. They were all high back in the Renaissance. That's why.
It's probably a lot more accessible. back then.
Right. So, you know, if you think about it from his perspective, Michelangelo spent basically 3 years away from what he really wanted to do, which is sculpting,
Right.
to paint a ceiling, which is turned out to be
the most,
unbelievable
right.
and amazing. But all the women in that painting do kind of look like men, so he did manage to do what he wanted to do, which is paint men.
Good point.
That's actually not my college professor made that point back in, which I don't know.
If you look at it, it does make sense.
It does, but I mean, it's a beautiful and amazing work of art. So also, I want to point out that in researching that and reading that, I don't feel like Michelangelo sold out, but I do feel like that sometimes when you're forced to paint something that you don't want to paint and you kind of feel like you're selling out, as long as you give it your all and really do your best,
right.
a lot of times it'll turn out way better than you ever would have expected, and you're taken out of your comfort zone and you end up making a work of art that's way better than you would have done had you stayed in your comfort zone.
Your zone.
So selling out may not always be a bad thing, depending on what we look at as selling out. So what do you think selling out is here, Kevin?
I found a few interesting quotes here. One you know Annie Lennox. You know who that
I
is?
do.
Okay.
Remember.
I found a very interesting quote here from her. Is there are two kinds of artists left: those who endorse Pepsi and those who simply won't.
Oh, nice.
Which,
I've never heard that quote.
That is a pretty awesome quote.
That's classic.
And I don't. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like that's kind of true. I have a confession to make, Kevin.
You love Pepsi.
I'm still thinking back on the dogs as being number 5 for the top thing selling. I was once commissioned to paint, and this is a dark and embarrassing story. I was once commissioned from a guy to paint his dogs around a poker table with him as the poker dealer and his wife as the cocktail waitress in a cocktail suit.
Wow.
Bringing cocktails to the dogs.
So
that's
interesting.
And I did it for money, Kevin. I did it for $30 green, and it was.
I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it.
It was a horrible painting, and I was embarrassed to sell it when it was done. And I don't think that I signed it. Actually, I think
it's a little out.
I didn't sign it,
unknown,
hoping that no one will ever.
So when that shows up in a gallery, 100 years from now, it's going to be unknown artist.
That will never be in a gallery anywhere north of hell.
Yeah.
That is where that painting belongs.
And that kind of brings me to this next quote I found, which is, once people said, give me liberty or give me death. Now they say, make me a slave, just pay me enough.
Oh, yeah?
And that's
sad. It's really depressing.
I know, isn't it? That is...
So people, you'd say society's integrity has gone down.
Just pay me enough to get by, and I'll draw anything that you want.
Huh. That's a bummer, man.
It is. That's a crappy quote.
But there's also a lot of artists and musicians, particularly, because the media really goes after them, who we consider iconic.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be here and they wouldn't have made it without selling out. For example, the Beatles.
Oh, yeah.
Were a sellout. I mean, they were a dirty, grungy, bar band, and they had long hair, and they would, cuss and stuff on stage, and they were awesome. Super awesome. But then...
And now they influenced every genre of music.
They realized they had to cut their hair, get famous. Then they grew that hair back out and started rocking it again. And then they had all these unbelievable albums. So sometimes you got to play the game a little bit, you get ahead, and then do your own thing.
Yes.
So
you have to know your boundaries, I think. You have to know what is too far for you.
Right.
And what is kind of giving the person what they need to
Right.
make it more publicity.
Ultimately, it's a subjective thing. Yeah, you got to choose for yourself what
Exactly.
Yeah, what is too far for you. But I also want to mention that if you do decide that it's okay to sell out until you make it, which is, fake it till you make it, that's not necessarily wrong. You do what
Yeah.
you got to do to get ahead while you do it, in the art world especially.
Definitely.
But make sure that you maintain yourself and that you stay true
Right.
to yourself on the inside so that once you do make it, you can get
Exactly.
ahead and make art
Right.
as yourself. Now,
You don't want to go painting dogs
No.
or anything like that.
I did find this article by Stephanie Theobald. She wrote an article which says...
There we go. We're back.
All right.
And we're back.
And she wrote an article that says, and I'm going to just quote her because she said it way better than I ever could. And this is Stephanie Theobald's words.
All right.
She says, artists have always been obsessed with money. From Leonardo da Vinci's patronage by the Medici to Salvador Dali being dubbed Avida Dollars
Wow.
that's cold.
Yeah.
By a bitter Andre Breton. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not familiar with that guy. In 1939, and Andy Warhol said that good business is the best art. This spiritual love child, his spiritual love child was a banker turned artist, Jeff Koons, famous for his curio kitsch and pedals and super rich. But Julius Straubaban, art historian, points out that Warhol never claimed his work was any deep value and openly said his work was about money. So,
Well, that's...
so you get artists like Warhol who
Don't...
he didn't sell out. He started off being just about money, and
Yeah.
that's all he was about. I will say
That's one way.
that it worked out for him, but if you're really after big bucks,
He was also...
the arts are probably not where you want to be. You should have gone into business school
Yeah.
instead of art school, but
Yeah.
this is not necessarily. This is a good way to have a rich soul, but not a rich
Right.
bank account.
Well,
is
if
my
you really
experience.
want to do art and have it as a business, you do need to have some kind of business sense or training. Whether that I know most artists don't like that aspect of the bit of having to do it.
No.
They just want to create it and then let it stand for itself.
Right? Yeah,
But that isn't how
they can't always
that
do it.
doesn't-
Not in today's society,
No,
for sure.
there's way too much talent
Yeah.
for you to not be able to project
Right.
and be in front of people.
right.
And unless you have some kind of platform or something you can get out in front of people to do that, then the subject that you choose, it doesn't matter what you choose if no one sees it.
Right. So it sounds like you're kind of changing your mind just a little bit from your early initial gut reaction, which is to say that maybe you do have to sell out just a little bit at the beginning, or maybe you don't have to sell out, but you do have to sell a little bit.
Yes, you definitely have
if
to
you want to
sell.
make it.
You don't have to sell out, but you do need to
Sell.
sell your stuff.
Yeah, stuff, and you need to make sure that you get out there.
Exactly.
But if you're just doing it for fun too,
Yeah,
then that's
but
awesome.
put it in
also.
your living room.
Yeah, put
That's
it in your
fine,
living
too.
room.
You don't-
Yeah,
if
show
you-
it to the family. That's great.
If you don't want to do it as a specific business,
Right. Yeah.
But-
if you're just painting for you and you have no intention of selling, then you're going to still have similar issues. Your family is going to be trying to force you to paint certain things, and you
True.
have to find out whether or not you're going to give in and paint, grandma's spoon collection, or whether you're going to paint for yourself. So there's always going to be these moral
yeah,
things.
that's selling on its own right.
I'd say paint her spoons and make her happy, but
Hey.
But definitely paint your own painting after that. So
Get you a bigger
that could be
birthday
the way to do it too. One of your own, one for them. One of your own.
Exactly.
That's
If that's how you gotta
Maintain
do.
balance.
Yeah, you gotta have some kind of sanity
Yeah.
in what you're doing. Otherwise, you're gonna quit and you're gonna get frustrated.
So, in summary, what have we said?
summary.
We've decided
In summary.
choose your subject for yourself, but understand that if you choose a subject that's not necessarily popular and you are hoping to sell it,
You may have a limited audience.
you're going to have a limited audience, and you may have to go farther to find your audience and to sell that work.
Exactly.
But if you're okay with that, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So choose a subject that you want to paint. Make sure it's one that you're interested in and you're willing to stick with for the hours and hours that it's going to take to finish it.
Yes.
And then, but beforehand, definitely consider,
Yeah.
how easy it's going to be.
If nothing else, keep in mind that those genres are out there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can kind of create your own artwork and your own subject in like a sub niche of that.
Right.
And then it'll be in its own little box with those things and make it easier to sell.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, guys. Well, I think
that's
that's
pretty
our that's our third podcast today.
Yeah, so well, go ahead and tell us what you think selling out is.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had some pretty good quotes here. If you have any quotes that you find or anything that kind of spurs your imagination of what selling out might be.
Yeah, and if you think that selling out is just wrong and it's non-negotiable, you should never do it, and this sell out at the beginning and then not sell out is a tenuous line to walk, I totally can respect that decision.
Definitely.
Shoot us an email and argue that point. We definitely want to hear from you, and we want to hear what you have to say about this subject and any future podcasts that you want to hear as well.
Yeah, definitely. Just leave comments in the section below, and we'll get back to you if we can. As soon as we can.
As soon as we can. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. You have a great week.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Articulate with Kevin and Sean. Subscribe on iTunes or check them out on drawingandcoloring.com. Always reminding you to keep it simple.